everyone. Thank you for coming to listen to my crazy ramblings on critical infrastructure and critical infrastructure legislation. Very much a passion of mine. And at the last GRIM, I actually talked about some of the legislative fails that we've had in critical infrastructure security and building out CISA and kind of where we came from. But this time it's part deux, and we're actually going to dive into some of the really great things that have happened over the last couple of months and since our last talk. So let's dive right in. Maybe. Seriously? Okay. Okay, there we go. This is really interesting. Okay, so who am I? Why should you care? You probably shouldn't. I'm a strange cat who's been doing critical infrastructure for a very long time. Actually a Plank owner at MPPD, which was what came before CISA, and a lot of the work that we did on vulnerability assessments and kind of understanding systems approaches to things helped to create things like the chemical security program, things like CISA in the form that we know it today. So that's why I kind of talk about critical infrastructure a lot. I love it. I've always been very fascinated by it. I do a couple other things. I'm the CEO of a company called ShadowByte, and we do threat intelligence. I also have my own kind of advisory company. I'm on the board for Women's Society of CyberJutsu, advisory board for Safe Escape, advisory board for RAISES, and then blah, 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 some other things. I also host a podcast called The National Blast. And if you guys want to learn more about cybersecurity legislation from the point of the view that I have as kind of a security researcher and a business owner, and then also some of the things that legislators have to say when they're creating this legislation, then you should totally check it out. Most importantly, I'm a gamer. I love games. If you're a gamer, reach out to me. I will kick your butt at something. I like to smoke meat, and I make killer cakes. So that's me. Oh, you're kidding me right now with this, aren't you? There we go. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? The last talk that we had about this critical infrastructure stuff, we kind of focused on the early days of DHS and really what the legislative challenges were in this organization kind of becoming its own thing. For example, when you bring together 22 different agencies and you try to smoosh them all together in one new agency, there's bound to be some crazy things that happen there and some growing pains. And I think the last 15 years specifically of DHS have demonstrated that. We've seen lots of reorgs, lots of changes in structure, lots of who's really in charge of this, who's really in charge of that. And it's just now over the last couple of years, through largely, some standout folks like Chris Krebs and Jen Easterly, who we're going to talk about a little bit today, who've really kind of changed that paradigm a little bit to get DHS moving in the right direction, especially when it comes to security and cybersecurity. So this time, we're going to dial into CISA a little bit more and some of the cool things that are going on there. We're going to talk about my girl crush on Jen Easterly because she's just amazing and I love her to death. We're also going to talk about some of the legislation that it has been passed or is being passed over the last couple of months that's really affected CISA's ability to do their job. But we're also going to talk about what different things mean when we say legislation, because I see a lot of people, will respond to a news headline that says, on the floor, there's a bill that will do this, and everybody gets all up in arms. We're going to talk about what that really means. And then, of course, highlighting the things that CISA has done. We need a very specific new kind of strategy for cybersecurity. And I think everybody here can agree that Log4j has kind of really changed some perspectives about what that collaboration means and what it should look like in the future. Also, hashtag not my Batman. Next slide. Okay, first things first. Let's just take a minute to appreciate this amazing, badass human being. Jen Easterly, the director of CISA, who everybody kind of fell in love with almost instantly when she did her first Black Hat talk, wearing this amazing, Chinese blue jeans outfit and t-shirts that said "Free Britney," which, by the way, Britney is now free. Correlation? I don't know. If you ask at Ray Redacted on Twitter, he thinks she's amazing because she solves Rubik's Cubes. She embraces her hacker ethos, which I totally agree with. And, she's created a new paradigm for public-private partnership. And I totally agree with that. But there's also some other things that she's been doing over the last couple of months that have really, really changed the paradigm. And I hate that word paradigm, but change the paradigm in what cybersecurity collaboration across the government is meant to look like and how to get industry more involved. Just like, Chris Krebs, and honestly, just like the mission of MPPD and then CISA since the very beginning, private sector, government, public sector, these collaborations are an absolute must if we're going to get anything right. So some of the reasons that I am absolutely fascinated and impressed with what Jen and Chris Inglis have been able to do here. Well, first of all, she was just named the Cybersecurity Person of the Year, which I totally get behind. And there's a few articles you can read about that will tell you all of those reasons. And they're good reasons. But some of my personal reasons, she comes from offense, right? So she comes from a much more offensive security perspective. And I've said this a million times, and I'll say it, every day and twice on Sunday. To truly understand how to defend anything, you have to be able to understand how the bad guys are using it. I say this, when I was an EOD tech, there's a reason that they taught us to make chemical weapons, to make nuclear weapons, to make IEDs, so that we would understand how the bad guys were thinking about explosives. And every time that changed, we learned more about it, and it made us better at our jobs. And that's absolutely true when we're talking about cybersecurity. You can never be a good defender if you don't truly understand the capabilities of the offender. And I think that's a uniquely new and desperately needed piece for CISA. Now, being very, very public on the Hill, this is something that, Chris Krebs did this also, and Jen is doing it with her own style, which I really am impressed with. So being able to be a government employee at this high of a level, often it's difficult to say specifically what you think without getting, kind of rumbles from the Hill or rumbles from political pieces that, you don't really want. That said, when you're able to speak freely and without worrying about those political issues, it makes you so much more powerful. And this is something we saw with Chris Krebs, but like I said, Jen's doing it in her own way, and she's been very vocal about specific things. For example, FISMA. Absolutely promoting the idea that for her organization to thrive and for cybersecurity to really thrive, that FISMA has to be updated. Things like this, cyber is a team sport, and it absolutely is a team sport. That ethos and Rob Inglis, his ethos of collaboration across not just government agencies, but using the private sector, using the public sector, is exactly what we need to continue in cybersecurity. So that's really great. Let's talk about legislation now. So this year in the 117th Congress, there have been 370 separate bills and resolutions during this time. And what I mean by cyber bills or resolutions is that that's how many bills and resolutions address something that has to do with cybersecurity. Now, I want to go over this kind of what's the difference between a bill and a resolution and because it's important when we as cybersecurity professionals, organizations, and public sector members start looking at how this is going to affect us, how it affects our business, how it affects how we have to act every day. So 370, there are bills and there are resolutions. Remember that a bill, somebody, you read in the news all the time, well, there's a bill on the House floor, there's a bill on the Senate floor. A bill has been enacted as a point or plan of action. That means there is something else for the rest of the government to do. They are going to provide that overarching kind of guideline, and they're going to expect other people in government like DHS or NSA or ... to actually execute on that legislation. A resolution, however, is just an adoption or an agreement among that particular committee, that particular caucus, whatever that is. And those are great, and sometimes they're very useful, and sometimes you'll see these things happen kind of in coordination with each other, which is how it's supposed to be. But I want all of you, I want all of the listeners to go back to your 10th grade civics lessons and remember what that means. So instead of freaking out, as I often do every time I see a bill about incident reporting, which we're going to talk about, and failed bills about incident reporting, the media tends to hop on these things as if they are definitely going to happen. This bill is going to make you report in 24 hours, and that's that. That's all you get. And that kind of starts panic when you start talking to organizations who are working in cybersecurity exclusively, but definitely those who fit outside of general cybersecurity, like banks or other critical infrastructure. So remember that just because a bill has been introduced, and just because a bill maybe has passed either the House or the Senate, does not mean that it is enacted, that it is a law. But here's what it does mean, and this is the most important thing you can take from this slide entirely. When a bill is introduced, you, as the American citizen, have the opportunity to influence how it is written and how it goes forward. Input from you to your senator, to your representative, and to those caucuses is absolutely crucial. Now, I think everybody here has kind of heard, well, what can I really do? I'm a big organization, and all I can hope to do is maybe let them hear this group that I put together, let them hear kind of what they think. But you can do a lot more than that. By getting involved and understanding the legislation that's being created, you can ultimately help shape how that legislation actually passes. And I'm going to use the incident reporting bill, three of the incident reporting bills that were actually introduced towards the end of this year. None of them got passed, and all for good reason. But by following each of them and taking the things that were important from each one and pushing them kind of together, and then making that checklist of, okay, these are the areas where we are really missing or completely shy on. Let's focus on that for the next bill that's going to come out. You can help. You can make changes, and you should be interested in this. If you're a CEO, a CISO, if you're a massive company and you don't have a legislative affairs person, I highly recommend that you do. Okay. Next slide. So ones to watch. There were so many, 370 different bills or resolutions. That's a lot. But some obviously get more press than others. Obviously, the infrastructure bill, now the bipartisan infrastructure law, has gotten a lot of attention for cybersecurity because of the perceived lack of budget that is actually going to cybersecurity. So if you look on this slide, you can see that way at the bottom, it says cybersecurity and other infrastructure programs, $10.11 billion. Now, if you look at this little slice of pie and how much the whole rest of the $1 trillion law actually addresses, you can say, okay, well, that's really not very much for cybersecurity, right? I mean, it kind of looks like they're ignoring us entirely. But you have to remember that every single one of these other pieces, transportation funding, roads, bridges, freight and passenger rail, broadband, public transportation, airports, Army Corps of Engineers, ports and Coast Guard, every single one of these pieces of infrastructure is built on information and information security, every single one of them. When we talk about really changing infrastructure in this country, I always think about back in the day when I was at DHS, when we did the water system, we did assessments for that, looking at a dam and what exactly a dam has to rely on in a systems approach to be able to do its job and to be able to protect all of the things that are in its second and third order effects. Well, you might say probably nothing, right? But that's not true. If we're going to modernize the entire electric grid, that massively affects that dam. If we're going to massively update how we get freight from one point in the country to another point in the country safely, that is going to be interacting and affecting all of these other pieces. So I encourage you, as you think about this particular bill, not to think of it as we got screwed because we only got 10.11 billion, but look at it as in every single one of these other pieces is critical and has a critical reliability on cybersecurity. Don't forget. The incident reporting saga of 2021. If you have seen any of my other talks or you listen to the National Blast, you will know that this is something that's very important to me. You know, I'm not the first one to jump on this kind of or jump in front of this moving train. There have been a lot of people before me. We've been talking about this for ages and ages. We've been talking about, you know, all of the bills and laws that are currently in place that really make it difficult for incident reporting for some people and easy for other people. And incident reporting as it pertains to a company or an organization who may have been breached, and all of the litany of things that they go through, right? So if we think about Congress coming together over the last 6 months or so, and each house, okay, the House and the Senate, and then on each side, Republicans and Democrats creating their own versions of incident reporting based on the handful of cybersecurity experts that they are talking to and dealing with. If you read through each of these, and now I don't expect any of you to be as nerdy as I am and read all of these bills, but I have. And there's this great chart, and I've just put part of it here because, again, if you're in cybersecurity, if you're a CEO, a CISO, if you're running an incident response team, if you're the legal team who's trying to keep your company out of trouble, get this report. It was done by CRS, Congressional Reports, and the link is right here. But you can look side by side at all of these. And just a random side note, this reporting agency actually puts together packets like this all the time. So often there are bills that are competing with each other to do the exact same thing. In this case, obviously kind of the same, and it's really good and easy to go through each kind of little thing with them stacked together like this. I highly do not recommend going in and trying to read every single bill independently, like me, because I'm a nerd. So let's talk about, just quickly, the good things and the bad things about incident reporting. So if you're a hacker, if you're a security researcher, right away, the first thing that you really hate is the CFAA. It's ruining lives. It's making people get sued. It's making lawyers more powerful. It's also jacking up the whole process, right, of incident reporting. If you can't go to a company or the government and say, hey, I found this vulnerability, or you got breached, here, I want to help you, without being sued, without being, ignored completely, without being, a part of the process in a meaningful way, then why would you do that job? Why would you do that? And unfortunately, we need those people. We need the hackers. We need the security researchers, because they account for 70+% of all breaches that are actually reported. So as we take a look, or as you take a look, and again, please download the report and read it individually. As you start looking through this report, you're going to notice that there are a lot of things missing from every single one of these bills. And that's always the case. There are a lot of things missing when it comes to how to truly handle third-party reporting. Now, they talk about third-party reporting, but only in the way of a specific company who might be reporting another company. But it doesn't address what that means in terms of, let's say, supply chain issues. So, random example, if you're company XYZ and you have, 15 companies that provide you, supplies and materials, and you want to report one of them, or they want to report one of you, what does that look like? Would you do that? Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you work together? Because everybody's afraid of getting sued and screwed. And we don't want that culture anymore. We don't need that culture. So being able to not necessarily fine-tooth these, but actually compare the good things and the bad things and take from that what we can do for the next round is absolutely crucial. Now, thankfully, like I said before, none of these passed. There was partial incident response legislation that was put into the NDAA at the last minute that was taken out that regarded the incident response, and it's a good thing that it was. But now, like I said before, you have the opportunity to help shape the next bill that comes. Talk to your congressman, talk to your senator, talk to whatever caucus is creating the next piece of cyber legislation, and make sure you understand how it's going to affect you. Otherwise, you're kind of just sitting back and watching them come up with, more things like CMMC that is a whole other story that we won't get into. So that's incident reporting. And by the way, I could go into this in so much more detail, but I don't want to bore you guys. So if you're interested in it, reach out to me and we'll wax nostalgic about all of the things that happened this year with incident reporting. Now let's talk about some of the cool things that CISA has actually been able to do and that Jen and Chris have been really pushing that I love, that I absolutely love. The bug hunt as a business. Now, you guys are going to say, oh, well, people have been doing bug bounties forever. It's not a big deal. It's not nothing new, and we shouldn't get too excited about it. I beg to differ. When you have a hacker, former hacker, in charge of a defense organization who sees things, again, from that point of view, from that offense point of view, you get a whole culture shift in what that actually means. Very happy to say the DHS came out with their bug hunt program just, I think it was a week ago, allowing you to go in and try to hack their system. Now, government agencies, the Department of Defense has done this, other agencies have done this, but the bigger issue here is that it gets us to the most important part of all of this, and that is normalizing the breach, okay? We have already seen with, Log4j, SolarWinds, Microsoft Exchange, the litany of issues that we've seen in cybersecurity in 2021, we've already seen that you're going to get breached. We know it. It's not a statistical probability, or it's not a maybe, it's an if, or an if, it's a when. So why don't we just all embrace that culture? Bug hunt as a business, standard practice, make sure you have, kind of your vulnerability reporting documentation good to go, but let's continue to push this idea for government, for private sector, for public sector, for everyone. Let's start working together, right? So that's something I've really liked. The other thing that Jen has been saying over and over in the media, and I just want to give her a hug, a non-touching hug because it's COVID, but hire the hackers. Hire the hackers. All the security researchers I know, all the hackers I know are really great human beings, really are, and they want to help. This is what they do. They create businesses so that they can do this just to let people know what's wrong and what they can do to fix it. That's incredible. I mean, I don't want to say that like this should be an entire branch of a non-military military, but I kind of feel like it should be. Like people that are dedicated to just fixing all of the issues on the internet. Now, why is this a good thing? If I go back to what we kind of talked about before, when you understand the offensive piece of anything, whether it's cybersecurity or information technology or bomb making, you inherently begin to understand what to look for, what indicators to look for if you want to try to defend it. Hire all the hackers. The hackers know, the hackers are in on this. Now, everybody, as these kind of press releases have been coming out that are talking about this, everybody says, well, the government is never going to really hire hackers, right? Because we don't fit the standards of, the model government employee. We aren't going to cut our hair, and our tattoos are all going to be out, and maybe, we smoke weed. So what? So what? The entire change and shift in how DHS and the government is actually going to be able to address threats in the future, threats like Log4j, is by getting those people involved. And I have a crazy, crazy idea for this. I have a crazy, massive rebuild the government, but subtly idea for this. Let's talk about it. So this is only a couple of the items, but we're already seeing CISA really start to do several of these, which is magnificent. Number one, normalize the breach. You are going to get breached. Something that I've been very excited to see with Log4j are the ongoing calls with DHS. Jen Easterly is on, the NKIC leader is on, all of the people that you want to talk to get data from is on the call to actually talk you through and answer questions. These calls go on for 2 hours. I've seen one go for 3 hours. Being able to reach out to the community and say, it's okay, everybody's dealing with this. That needs to be the new norm, okay? You're going to get breached. Everyone is going to get breached. That is the nature of the beast that we are currently fighting. So if we say normalize the breach, then we can get rid of this blame game that we're all playing with each other. The lawyers trying to blame the security researcher that brought it up, and the government trying to blame the company and say, you weren't ready for this and you should have done this, 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 and this. And then, of course, the company trying to blame literally everybody else so that they don't have to pay fines. The system is broken. It doesn't work. It is all about blame shift and nothing about collaboration. And that absolutely has to change if we're going to make a difference in the coming 2 years. So CISA really, and I know they're working on this if partially, is this whole idea of a clearinghouse where all breaches are reported kind of to this one central thing. But where this gets difficult is that it can't truly be a government-only agency. It has to be bits and pieces of government, private industry, and the public sector that are all invested in it and that all have authority in it. And this is something that, hasn't really been done to the extent that I'm kind of hoping that it could be. Utilizing the sector-specific agencies, the regulation agencies. One of the biggest complaints that I heard when the first incident reporting bill came out or was put on the floor was that, are we supposed to report to all of the regulatory agencies that we have to report to? Do we have to report to, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and the FTC and then CISA and then FBI? That has been a massive problem, and companies still don't know the answer to that. Even though there has been guidance put out recently that says you need to reach out to your reporting agency and then they will let us know. Okay, well, what happens if they don't let you know and you come back and say, hey, what were you doing? These are valid questions. These are things that need to be hashed out in a new kind of collaborative style with working for the government or working with the government. The CSA program needs to be repurposed so that, and that's cybersecurity protectors and directors that are out in the community that are meant to be there so that anybody, any organization, any piece of critical infrastructure can come to them and ask them questions, and they can be guided directly to the source that is required at DHS. It needs to be kind of judged up a little bit. Yes, I said judged. The ISACs, empowering them with more responsibility and allowing them to really have the teeth to be able to make change when it comes to collaboration and information sharing. We need more carrots. We got to have more carrots. We have so many sticks, and the sticks are making us thrive in the blame game. We got to get rid of some of the sticks. And I am the first person who will say, I love regulation. I do. Regulation has done so many great things for us. Regulation has given us driver's license and roads that have like street signs that you have to pay attention to. And it's given us aviation regulation where we're comfortable knowing that we're not going to fall out of the sky, right? Regulation is not a bad thing, but regulation has to be, it absolutely has to be supported with all the carrots, as many carrots as you can give. Otherwise, why? Why would you want to cooperate with the big stick organization who's going to sue you and take money from you? I wouldn't. Widely understood system of data sharing and collaboration. And this is no easy feat. It's absolutely not an easy feat. It's difficult, and we've been talking about it for 30 years, probably longer. I just wasn't alive back then. But we have to get better at this. And that's where I think this sort of joint clearinghouse that involves everybody and the buy-in from everybody is the same, that's how we're going to start to get into this. That's my first ever public-private government joint ruled agency. It's going to be crazy. I'll tell you more about it when I'm finished writing it, but I want your thoughts. I want to talk to you about it. I want to talk to everybody about it. This isn't just my issue. Going back to the very beginning of this, when I said, everybody, you have the power, you have the authority, you have the ability to help guide legislation, especially in cybersecurity, where everybody is just trying to grab their piece of the pie right now. How about we all get involved and start telling them what is actually required, what is actually needed, and thinking out of the box, thinking out of the world, thinking in totally different ways. If you could change the process for incident reporting, if you could change the process for how funding is delivered to critical infrastructure entities, if you could find the best way to communicate with DHS or FBI on cybersecurity issues, what would it look like? What would you do? Let's figure it out. CISA has done an absolutely amazing job this year, absolutely amazing. But as we've seen, as the litany of threats continued through the year and now up to Log4j, we're just seeing the beginning of the capabilities and the devastation that can be caused by cyber. So let's start getting legislation, policies in place that actually let us all do our jobs better.